So now it's time to move to the program. First of all, I want to kindly ask all the speakers to stay on time because the day is quite busy. So we have to really stick with the timing. The first speaker will be Professor Davide Menozzi. Just a few words. Davide is the chair of this edition of the summer school, and he is really the man who shaped and conceptualized our program. So I'm really, really happy to let him starting the day and introduce you to the topic, which is food safety aspect of integrated food systems. So Davide, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chiara. And thank you all for and welcome to this 2021 edition of the Parma Summer School. As Chiara said, I'm the chair of the program committee. So, and I share also the pleasure to introduce you to this year's summer school with the rest of the organizing and program committee of this year. As you see, the topic is about food safety aspects of integrated food systems. As a background, I'm an agricultural economist. So one economist should, let's say, chair the program committee of food safety summer school, let's say. Mostly this is the reason, because this year we will try to, let's say, talk about food safety aspects, of course, but with the light, in the light of an integrated food system. So first of all, let's ask ourselves what food safety food systems are actually. So I'm quite sure everyone has an idea about that. Well, this one is a picture coming from the high-level panel of experts of the CFS of the United Nations. And well, as you can see, it's a quite complex picture. But so in this picture, you see that within the food systems frame, of course, we have the food supply chains. So starting from production, agricultural production, processing, distribution of food. But then you have also the food environments, which is not the ecological environment, but has to do with the contexts where consumers make their choices. And of course, you have the consumer behavior, the dietary behavior, and all these aspects, all these elements have outcomes, of course, in terms of nutrition and health for the people, but also you have several social, economic, and also environmental outcome impacts of these systems from different perspectives. So as you can see, all these elements are strictly connected with the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. And all of them are also connected with the, let's say, above line of all the drivers that basically have an effect on the systems. These drivers are connected with the environment, so the environmental, the ecological drivers, such as climate change, for instance, but also you have technological drivers, innovations, you have the political drivers, and you have also cultural drivers, for instance, religious, how these affect the behavior of the consumers worldwide, and then also, at the end, not the least, the demographic drivers, the growing population worldwide. All these drivers have an effect on the system. And so food systems should embrace all this wide picture, taking into account all these connections, let's say. And so the next question is, why food systems? Well, I think we are just in time because just last week, the United Nations Summit was actually about food systems. And in this occasion, let's say the United Nations Secretary General indicated the link between the food systems and several global challenges, including, of course, hunger, but also climate change, inequalities, poverty. And he also argued that sustainable and resilient food systems are, let's say, essential for achieving the goals of the Agenda 2030, so providing affordable, safe, healthy, nutritional, adequate, and also ecologically sound food for a growing population. And so in this summit, it was also argued that science-based solutions are required for achieving these goals. So then we go to the next question: how food safety? So, and this probably is the most difficult one. How shall we, let's say, embrace this large picture, taking into account so different elements? Well, necessarily we must take into account multiple challenges. So, as I said, climate change, but also other environmental challenges, including biodiversity, but also social and economic challenges, equality, access to food need to be taken into account. And how the next issue is combining themselves different disciplines. So interdisciplinarity is a really key element. So taking into account variables, factors from other disciplines is a relevant element. So in this case, you must, let's say, embrace a more coordinated and holistic approach in your activity as much as possible. And for doing this, we necessarily need new tools, also methodological tools, analytical tools in order to manage these dynamics, but also manage, as we said, also the big data coming from different sources. So this is let's say the frame, the background, and here is our summer school, which is, as I said, about the food safety aspects of integrated food systems. So our ambition, let's say, is to provide you with elements related with the food safety issues, but strictly connected with the transformations that we have around the food systems. For instance, including the technological innovations and so the necessary adaptation of, for instance, food analysis, food risk analysis, and risk assessment procedure to these technological innovations. For doing this, necessarily, we must, as I said, take into account a great heterogeneity and complexity of the food systems. And for doing this, we require necessarily multiscale governance, which means, let's say, combine themselves different kind of actors, different kind of activities, different stakeholders, engage different kind of stakeholders, farmers, industries, but also policymakers, institutions, authorities, necessarily. Taking into account, as I said, all the interactions around. So it's not a linear element, it's not a linear model. Let's say linear effects are hardly in the real world. So we must necessarily take into account feedback, loops, non-linear effects. Of course, this is more difficult also from an analytical point of view. We must take into account synergies between different objectives. Synergies means that you can do good things in different kind of objectives, but also trade-offs. Trade-offs necessarily are connected with the conflicting objectives. So you are doing a good thing from, let's say, an environmental point of view, but you are not doing a good thing from an economic or social one. And then, let's say, finally, regarding the approach, as I said, we need multidisciplinarity, involving different kind of stakeholders. And that's why in this year summer school, we invited different kind of expertise, competencies, including, of course, food technologists, risk evaluators, but also chemists, social scientists, jurists as well, and ecologists. So how we decided to frame this Parma Summer School, this edition, we decided to frame it around three different perspectives. The first one is related with the science-oriented aspects. So from this point of view, we will consider the changes in the food safety, in the food systems, as I said, related with the challenges that we are considering, and how, in particular, these changes will lead eventually to new risks and new hazards for the peoples, and so how we must deal with these new kind of risks and hazards. And then we decided to take also demand-oriented perspective into account, so considering the changing habits and behavior of the consumers and how these changes are also related with the different evolutions of, let's say, of the food safety aspects related with new risks and new hazards for the consumers. And finally, we decided to take also a systematic and systemic-oriented approach. So in particular, for instance, taking into account the governance issues, how the governance, for instance, related with the risk analysis and risk assessment must evolve and must be adapted to the new challenges and new transitions that we are facing nowadays. So these three different challenges will be considered around the three different case studies that we have decided to consider in this edition of the summer school. So every day you will face a different case study. For instance, today you will the session that we will have today, this morning, is about biodiversity and environmental safety. So in this session, it will be illustrated the need for an advanced of environmental risk assessment in order to, let's say, better predict the effects on the environment, for instance, in the case of pesticides and bees. So this is the first case study. And again, this will be taken across the three different approaches: science-oriented, demand-oriented, and system-oriented perspectives. The second case study tomorrow, it will be about the chemical mixtures. In this case, you will deal with the human health risk assessments of chemical mixtures coming from different sources, which is, of course, one of the major issues around risk assessment in the EFSA. Of course, taking into account real-life scenarios. And finally, on the third day, the novel food and technologies will be considered. So in this session, you will address some of the technical and social and regulatory challenges regarding novel food technologies, including, for instance, synthetic biology, focusing, as I said, on societal marketing acceptance of these technologies and the related products. So this is more or less the frame of the Parma, this 2021 edition of the Parma Summer School. As I said, we decided to organize this summer school in 3 days, every day challenging a different case study. And every day will be divided in a morning session. In every morning session, you will be provided with the more recent advancement from each case study from different kind of experts. So taking into account the different perspectives that I have already mentioned. So scientists and experts will provide you with different views of the same case study from, of course, the environmental side, from the social science side. And this is the morning session and the morning activity. Then a limited number of participants, those who have applied for that, will also participate in the afternoon to the sessions where they will have the chance to meet the experts in order to share their experiences, their project studies, collecting, let's say, comments, suggestions in order to better implement, let's say, their activities and their studies. So, but also in the morning, so the afternoon session will be more, let's say, interactive. Whereas also in the morning, you will have the chance to pose questions to the speakers by using the chat. And you will have the chance at the end of the morning to challenge yourself with the live pool in order to, let's say, make this morning session more interactive as well. And that's it from my side. So thank you again for being here and attending also virtually this year summer school. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll do for sure. So thank you again, and good luck for everything.
Thank you, Davide.